He grabbed my wrist across the dinner table, twisted it hard enough that I heard the joint pop, and said if I didn't sign the papers by morning, he'd make sure I lost my job, my apartment, and every reference I'd ever need in this city. My mother was sitting right there. She refilled her wine glass. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I pulled my wrist back, picked up my coat off the chair, and walked out into the February cold without saying a word. Before I tell you what I did next, and how, 72 hours later, my father and my brother were fielding calls from the Canada Revenue Agency and a fraud investigator at the RCMP. Tell me in the comments. What is the one thing you did for your family out of love that they later used against you? I read every single one. I drove home with one hand on the wheel and the other pressed against my chest. Not because it hurt, because I needed to feel my own heartbeat to confirm I was still a person, and not just a financial instrument with a signature on file. My name is Sloan. Wait, no. I've been Sloan in my own head for so long that I almost said it out loud. My name is Waverly. No, that one's taken too in a way. My name is June. That's what my grandmother called me when I was small. Not my legal name, my real one. And right now, sitting in the parking lot of my building in Ottawa, staring at the dashboard, June felt like the only part of me that hadn't been borrowed, spent, or forged. I am 31 years old. I work as a senior compliance analyst at a mid-size financial advisory firm. My job, specifically, is to find where the rules have been bent, where the paperwork doesn't match the transactions, where someone thought they were clever enough to hide the seam. I do this 5 days a week. I am very good at it, and for the better part of a decade, I had somehow failed to turn that same skill set on my own family. That ends tonight, I thought. I went upstairs and put a bag of frozen peas on my wrist. Let me back up. My father, I'll call him what he is, not what he asked me to call him, is a man who built his entire identity on the appearance of success. He and my mother moved to Ottawa from Nova Scotia when I was 3. He worked in commercial real estate, and for a while, he was genuinely good at it. That was the version of him I grew up believing in. The version with the handshakes, and the good suits, and the ability to walk into a room and make everyone feel like they were lucky to know him. My brother is 4 years older than me. He is the kind of person who has always needed an audience. Even as a kid, he needed someone watching. Our parents gave him that audience. They gave him everything. They paid for his bachelor's degree in business at Queen's, then bankrolled his first attempt at a startup that never launched, then funded his second attempt. A hospitality consulting company that mostly seemed to involve expensive lunches and a very nice company credit card. I put myself through Carleton on a combination of OSAP, scholarships, and 3 part-time jobs. When I asked my parents why there was nothing left for my education, my father explained that the market had been rough and that family investments had to be prioritized. He said it the way you'd explain why a flight got delayed. Routine disappointment. Nothing personal. I believed him. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was co-signing a loan. 3 years ago, my brother needed $60,000 to cover a gap in his company's operating costs. Or so he said. He needed a co-signer because his personal credit score was, in his words, temporarily complicated. He asked me as a formality, he said. Just to get the bank to approve it, he would make every payment himself. I signed because my parents sat across from me at that same dining room table and told me I was being selfish for hesitating. My mother said that's what family does. My father said my brother just needed one more chance. One more runway. The first missed payment hit my credit 6 months later. I found out from my bank, not from my family. When I brought it up, my mother cried, and my father told me I needed to be more patient. I covered the arrears. I told myself it was a one-time thing. It was not a one-time thing. Tonight's dinner had been framed as a family catch-up. My mother had made her good lasagna, the one she only makes when she wants something. I should have recognized the sign. Instead, I showed up with a bottle of wine and sat down like a person who still believed in good faith. My father produced the documents after dessert. A promissory note, already drafted, in my name. Not a co-signature this time, a full liability transfer. $180,000. My brother's latest company was hemorrhaging money, and apparently the solution was to make the debt legally mine. When I said no, my father's face didn't even flicker. He just reached across the table, grabbed my wrist, and said what he said. My mother refilled her wine. I left. Now I was sitting on my bathroom counter at midnight with a bag of peas on my wrist, and something very quiet and very cold had settled into my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something more like clarity. I opened my laptop. I wasn't going to hack anything. I wasn't going to do anything dramatic. I was just going to look. Compliance analysts look. It's what we do. I started with the family RESP, the registered education savings plan my grandparents had set up when I was born. My father had managed it as my legal guardian, with the understanding that it would transfer to my control when I turned 18. Except, when I turned 18, my father told me the account had been restructured for tax purposes, and that he was still managing it on my behalf. When I turned 21, he said the market was volatile. When I turned 25, I stopped asking. I had never actually seen the account statements. Every time I brought it up, there was a reason, an excuse dressed as an explanation. Tonight, I remembered the account number. I had seen it once, years ago, on a document my grandmother had sent me directly before she died. She'd wanted me to have it. I'd written it in the back of an old notebook I still kept on my shelf. I found the notebook. I found the number. I called up the online portal for the financial institution. My father had set up a secondary contact on the account. himself, but the original account holder was still me. My sin, I reset the password. The screen loaded. The balance was $214. Not 214,014. I sat very still for a long time. Then I started going through the transaction history, and it was like watching a documentary about my own life that I hadn't known was being filmed. The withdrawals mapped onto my brother's failures with horrible precision. $12,000 in March 2019. That was around the time his first startup needed emergency operating capital. $22,000 in January 2021. His second company's incorporation fees and office deposit. On and on, neat and documented, right up until 14 months ago, when the account had $6,000 left, and my father had moved it to a joint account he shared with my mother, listing the transaction as an administrative transfer. There was a word for this. I knew the word very well because I worked with regulators who prosecuted it. The word was fraud. Not aggressive dad-at-dinner fraud, not family dispute fraud. Actual, documentable, federal-level fraud. He had withdrawn money from a registered account belonging to me without my authorization or knowledge, over a period of years, and funneled it through my brother's companies, at least, some of which appeared to be structured to receive these kinds of payments as consulting fees or capital contributions. I pulled up the CRA business registry and looked up my brother's company. I found 2 registered businesses under his name. One of them listed my father as a silent director. I checked the filing dates. The second company had been registered 2 months after I'd co-signed that loan. The loan I'd signed as a personal favor. The loan whose payments my family had expected me to quietly absorb. They hadn't needed my signature on that loan for the bank. They'd needed it to make me look like a voluntary participant in a financial structure I hadn't known existed. If I'd signed tonight's promissory note, it would have completed the picture. A paper trail, suggesting I had knowingly assumed liability for a series of debts I'd actually been defrauded into generating. My father wasn't just trying to get me to cover my brother's losses. He was trying to insulate himself from a paper trail that, without my signature, led directly back to him. He'd grabbed my wrist and threatened me because he was panicking. He should have panicked sooner. My phone lit up. My mother. I stared at the screen for 3 full rings. I answered. Do you have any idea what you've done tonight? Her voice was low and controlled in the way it only gets when she's furious but doesn't want the neighbors to hear. Your brother is beside himself. Your father is. The meeting tomorrow is everything, June. Everything. You need to come back and fix this, I said. He hurt my wrist, Mum. She was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Then he was stressed. You provoked him by refusing. You know how much is riding on this. Are you really going to throw this family away over a signature? I had spent 31 years waiting for her to say something else. To say she'd seen it. To say she knew. To say even once that she understood what it cost me to keep showing up to this table. But she wasn't calling to say that. She was calling because the machine needed another part, and she needed me to become it. She was the one who kept the machine running. She knew exactly what my father was. She'd watched it for years and stayed because the house was nice and the car was nice and the life, from the outside, looked like something worth protecting. Her silence wasn't survival, it was investment. I'm not coming back, I said. And tell him not to contact me. She said something I didn't hear because I'd already pulled the phone away from my ear. I turned it off and went back to my laptop. There was one more thing I needed to find. My father had a business meeting the following afternoon. I'd overheard him mention it at dinner, a pitch to a group of private investors for some new commercial property venture. He'd mentioned it the way he mentions things he's proud of, casually, to make sure you noticed. If he was trying to bring in outside investment while simultaneously facing a CRA audit trail he was trying to bury with my signature, then that meeting was leverage. Not just for him, for me. I needed to move fast. If my father realized I'd accessed that account, he might try to accelerate whatever he was planning, move money, restructure, get ahead of it. I had a contact. Her name is Rosalind. She used to work in the enforcement division at FinTrack, the Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Center of Canada, before moving to a private forensic accounting practice in Toronto. We'd worked together on a compliance audit about 4 years ago and had stayed in occasional touch. She was precise and she was serious and she did not panic. It was 1 a.m. I texted her, I'm sorry for the hour. I have something urgent. Fraud, possible money laundering through registered accounts, imminent investor meeting that could constitute securities fraud. Can you call? She called in 7 minutes. Tell me, she said. I told her. I laid it out the way I would in a compliance report. Chronological, sourced, unemotional. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, do you have documentation of the account history? I'm screenshotting it right now. Good. Don't touch anything else. I'm going to make a call to a contact at the RCMP Financial Crimes Unit. This is above a CRA referral. If your father is actively misrepresenting assets to investors tomorrow, that's securities fraud in addition to the tax violations. She paused. June, you understand that once I make this call, this isn't something you can pull back. I know. He's your father. I know what he is, said. She made the call. The next 48 hours were the strangest of my life. Rosalind connected with her RCMP contact and provided my documentation as a third-party tip. Because my father's investor meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon, there was a narrow window. The investigators moved quickly. They had been, it turned out, already looking into my father's business partner in connection with a separate filing irregularity. My case dropped into an existing investigation like a key into a lock. I was asked to do one thing: show up to the meeting, not to confront anyone, not to make a scene, just to be present, so that when my father introduced me to his investors as a co-director of the family's real estate holdings, which he apparently planned to do, I could simply confirm on record that I had not agreed to any such role. I wore a blazer. I made sure my wrist was covered. The meeting was in a glass-walled boardroom in a building near the Rideau Center. My father arrived in his good coat, my brother beside him in a blazer that was slightly too big. They looked polished. They looked like people who expected to walk out with a check. My father saw me and his expression did something complicated. Relief, maybe, that I'd come, layered over something else, something careful. There were 4 people already seated when we arrived. 2 of them I didn't recognize. The third introduced herself as an investigator from the RCMP's Integrated Market Enforcement Team. The 4th was a CRA compliance officer. My father's face went the color of old paper. The investigator didn't raise her voice. She explained, very calmly, that the meeting had been facilitated as part of an ongoing investigation. She enumerated the relevant sections: fraud over $5,000 under the criminal code, unauthorized use of another person's registered account, filing false business records. My brother reached for his phone. An officer near the door asked him to put it on the table. My father looked at me. "June," he said. Just my name, like a question. I thought about the way he'd grabbed my wrist. I thought about my mother refilling her wine. I thought about every OSAP payment I'd made while his management fees drained a savings account that had been mine since birth. "You should speak to a lawyer," I said. He was cautioned and detained for questioning that afternoon. My brother was taken separately. The charges were laid over the following weeks: fraud, tax evasion, through the misuse of registered accounts, and a count of criminal harassment in connection with the incident at dinner, which I had documented with photographs of my wrist, and a written account filed the morning after. My mother called 9 times in the first 3 days. I let them all go to voicemail. I listened to all 9 messages, once on a Tuesday evening with a cup of tea. In the first 4, she alternated between fury and pleading. In the 5th, she cried. In the 6th through 9th, she went quiet and practical, asking about the house, about their accounts, about what was going to happen. Not once did she ask if my wrist was okay. I didn't block her right away. I just stopped picking up. There's a difference, and it matters to me. Not for her sake, but for mine. I wanted to be someone who made a considered choice, not a reactive one. The RESP situation was referred to the CRA for a civil recovery proceeding in addition to the criminal charges. I was told by the investigator gently not to expect full recovery. Money that's been spent on defunct companies doesn't come back easily. But the process of accountability had started, and that was a thing I hadn't had before. What I had now was different from what I'd expected revenge to feel like. I had expected something hot, something satisfying in a loud way. What I actually felt was quiet, like a room after someone very loud has finally left it. I went back to work the Monday after the investor meeting. I sat at my desk. I opened my files. I did my job, which is finding the seams in the paperwork, the places where something has been hidden that shouldn't be hidden. The week after that, I moved my direct deposit to a new account at a different bank. I updated my emergency contact at work. I called my landlord and made sure my lease was solely in my name. Small things. Practical things. The kind of things you do when you're removing yourself from a structure that was built to keep you in place. I thought about what my grandmother had wanted when she set up that account. She'd wanted me to have something that was mine. A foundation. A start. She'd sent me that account number herself because she'd known, maybe, that it needed to be protected. It had taken me too long to look, but I'd looked. A lot of people in my position want the big dramatic moment. The scene where you say the perfect thing and the door slams and the music swells. I understand that. I wanted it too, for a long time. But the thing I've learned from the work I do, from years of sitting with financial records and compliance files, is that accountability doesn't look like a scene. It looks like a filing. It looks like a date stamp. It looks like a document that says, plainly, in language that doesn't care about your feelings, here is what happened, and here is what it cost. My father thought he was dealing with a daughter who loved him enough to absorb anything. He didn't realize he was dealing with someone who spent her days building exactly the kind of case he'd taught her, without meaning to be afraid of. I'm not free because I won. I'm free because I stopped paying for something that was never mine to owe. If you have ever been made to feel responsible for a debt you didn't create, drop clear in the comments. And if this reached someone who needed it today, share it. You never know who's sitting in a parking lot right now, frozen peas on their wrist, just starting to look.